Today, we're looking at NBA players that are stars today, but didn't always start out that way. We have some guys like Luka Doncic and LeBron James that were stars the second they stepped into the league. But there's also others that weren't great players at first, came into the league, played pretty bad their first couple of seasons, but then eventually turned things around and turned into the superstars we know them as today. So let's take a look. And let's first start out with someone we haven't heard from in a while, in Kawhi Leonard, who we now know as one of the best players in the entire league and maybe the best two-way player when healthy. But when he came into the NBA, he was coming off of 2 solid college years and was picked 15th overall. And his scouting report had him as a cross between Luke Mbah-a-Moute and Gerald Wallace, based on how he had played up until that point. It also said that he was not very disciplined defensively, gambles far too often, and leaves his teammates susceptible to giving up easy baskets, and that he lacks the polish and skill necessary to consistently operate on the wing, which are strong things to say about a player. Though coming into the league, he looked like a good prospect, but still had a lot of spots to work on in his game, and as a rookie, only averaged 7.9 points, 5 assists, and 1 rebound a game. But thanks to his play on both ends, he earned himself a starting spot for the Spurs and still finished in 4th in the Rookie of the Year voting, quickly starting to prove people wrong. Year 2 was another step in the right direction. Then from year 3 on, he was on a roll, because that season the Spurs went to the finals and Kawhi became their LeBron stopper. The next year he won the Defensive Player Award. The following season he became a first-time All-Star and won another Defensive Player Award. And in the year after that he averaged 25 points a game and became an official star in the NBA. At the time going through it, it seemed like it took Kawhi Leonard quite a while to become a superstar, but in the grand scheme of things looking back, it really didn't. It did take Jimmy Butler a little bit to turn things around though, because coming out of even high school he wasn't heavily recruited at all. So little that he ended up going to a junior college instead, and he went there for 1 year before moving to Marquette, where in year 2 he averaged only 5 points and 3 rebounds a game off the bench. In year 3 he became a starter, and in year 4 played good enough to get drafted 30th overall in the NBA. But even his draft report coming into the league said, good all-around player but lacks any one great skill. Fits the jack of all trades, master of none mold, which is actually still pretty accurate to this day. But then it continued and also said that he was basically trash offensively, and coming into the league, honestly that was pretty accurate too. The defense was always there, but in year 1 he averaged 8 minutes and 2 points a game off the bench, and it took him until year 3 to really even become a starter, and even when he did, he was known as a bad shooter and limited offensively. But then 2015 came around, and when he finally broke out and won the Most Improved Player award, fixed his 3-point shot, became an all-star, averaged 20 points a game, and became the new leader of the team while Derrick Rose was out with injury. And from then on out, he's really just been a star. And it was simply just a matter of waiting on his offensive game to catch up with the elite defense that he always was capable of. And once it did, he came out as a real leader. As for the Milwaukee Bucks, their 2 best players today started out very far away from where they're actually at today. When Giannis came into the league, he was getting compared to Nicolas Batum, and it didn't take him a ton of time to become great. But in his first year, he had to adjust. He still hadn't been playing basketball for a ton of time compared to everyone else, and oh yeah, he looked like this. He was 6'9" and 190 pounds. Came off the bench and averaged 6.8 points a game on bad shooting numbers. Well, he was always a solid prospect over the years, and no one could have expected him to develop the way he did, growing 2 more inches and adding 50 pounds of muscle just off the court. And on the court, with that work ethic, his game quickly followed. But year 4, he became a first-time All-Star, putting up 23 points a game. Year 6, a league MVP. Year 7, MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. And year 8, an NBA champion. So he came into the league not really the best, but very quickly turned things around. But his teammate Chris Middleton took a little bit longer, because he was a 3-star prospect in high school and wasn't even all that great of a prospect in college. So he was taken in the 2nd round, 39th overall, and spent most of his rookie year in the G League, only averaging about 6 points a game for the Pistons. Then for years he slowly developed on the Bucks, but was always that guy that was an okay second option, never made a huge impact on the team, and in the playoffs would always get eliminated early on. It wasn't until his 7th year in the NBA that he finally made it over the hump and became an all-star. But even then, it took until his finals performance in 2021 for most people to recognize that he was a true great player and not just an above average second option. But speaking of 2nd round picks, Draymond Green started out the same way. He had to spend all 4 years in college, and even then he was only taken 35th overall in the 2nd round. And coming into the league, he played the full season off the bench and only averaged 2 points a game. I think he was always going to be a great defender and a super smart player, but he got really lucky getting drafted by the Golden State Warriors in what was the perfect situation for him. Even in his sophomore season though, he was still coming off the bench for the entire year, and the only reason he got the starting spot in 2014 was because David Lee got injured in the preseason. But then Golden State played so good with Draymond as a starter that he made the all-defensive first team. They won 67 games and won the title that year. Even at that point, Draymond's game was far from complete, but like I said, he fit so well in with the Warriors system, it didn't matter. But then in his 4th year, he put up a career best 14 points a game, started making all-star teams, and helped them to a 73-9 record. So it's safe to say that him being in the starting lineup and his development were exactly what Golden State needed. Then in year 5, he teamed up with KD and won the Defensive Player of the Year award, really cementing himself as a star and really becoming the player he is today. Tobias Harris was a guy that really came out of nowhere. Maybe it wasn't so surprising. He ended up on the Milwaukee Bucks in his first year, and apparently they didn't think much of him because he only played 11 minutes a game and averaged 5 points. points. Well, then they still don't see much value in him, so they trade him to the Magic in year 2, who make him a full-time starter playing 36 minutes a game, and he instantly jumps up to averaging 17 and 8, a pace that he's really stuck to for the rest of his career up until this point. So he came into the league not so great, but it wasn't even his fault. He just wasn't given the proper opportunity, because I think originally had he been drafted by the Magic, he would have seen similar results for him in his rookie year. And it makes sense, he was a top 10 overall high school player and only played 1 year in college before going 19th overall. It's just really weird that he kind of plateaued that early in his career and just never got better. Someone who played like him early on usually goes on to become a star. Well, Tobias's game has transformed a ton, but the stats have stayed the same and he's never made an all-star team. Now, Paul George didn't come into the league like most superstars either. He's turned into one these days, but at first he was just in a bench role for the Pacers behind Danny Granger, only averaging 7, 3, and 1 a game. But it was always pretty easy to see that he was gonna be a great player. I mean, his draft comparison was Scottie Pippen. And it was pretty accurate because he would eventually turn into a version of that. And it didn't even take that long to happen, because already by year 3 he was averaging 17 points a game, was the most improved player, a first-time all-star, and in the postseason led his team to a game 7 against the eventual champion Miami Heat team. His time on the Pacers and those postseasons made him a star, but his time for the OKC Thunder and that 28 point per game season that he had while he was there is what made him a superstar. And now he remains as one of the best two-way players in the game, even though he necessarily didn't start out that way. We know that James Harden has been one of the NBA's premier players for years, but of course didn't start out that way either. And obviously it wasn't his fault, but because the OKC Thunder made him come off the bench, he came into the league not so great and nothing compared to his true potential. It's surprising though to look back and realize that he only played in OKC for his first 3 years in the NBA, and by year 3 he was already unanimously the best sixth man, winning him the award and helping his team to the NBA Finals. Then in year 4, his first ever time as a starter for the Rockets, he averages 26, 5, and 5, making it pretty clear that he had been ready to be a starter all along. But it was even scarier to think that he was just getting started, because 5 years later he'd make it clear that he was by far one of the best scorers in the history of the game when he led the league in scoring and won MVP, and it helped his case out even more by averaging 36 the next season. In that 3-year stretch, including the one where he played point guard and averaged 29 and 11, leading the league in assists, was without a doubt the best of his career. Kyle Lowry was different though, because it took him 7 years to find a team that actually wanted him. And it wasn't the team's fault either, because he wasn't so great when he played for the Grizzlies or the Rockets. Over his first 3 seasons in the league, he only averaged 8 points and 3 assists a game. Then he played for 4 years on the Rockets, but only slightly improved. And it wasn't until he arrived on the Toronto Raptors that he actually turned into a real solid player. I mean, it's very rare that you see a player in year 9 become a first-time all-star. But honestly, I think it just comes down to finding the perfect situation for yourself, and some people just being slower learners than others. It took a long time for Lowry to become the shooter and passer that he is today. Then finally, we have both Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet. Starting first with Fred, we all know he infamously threw himself that draft party and didn't get drafted. And not only that, he was a 3-star recruit in high school and then had to go through all 4 years of college like a lot of guys in this video. But he eventually signed with the Raptors and just barely made the final cut for the team. And it's surprising that they kept him around, because in year 1 he averaged 2 points and 0.9 assists a game. In year 2 he picked up the pace with 8 and 3 a night, but then his 3rd year came around and he started to break out. And it really happened during the postseason on their way to a championship. He had a couple of games where he even outplayed Kyle Lowry. So then they win the title, and then of course when the 19 and 20 regular season comes back around, he had all the confidence and experience in the world. And he's just been on a tear ever since and getting better and better every season, with him finally making the All-Star team this past year. And as for Siakam, he shared a similar path. He came into the league the same year as Fred and played off the bench in his first 2 seasons and didn't get the starting job until their championship season. And when he did, he quickly became a most improved player candidate, because he very quickly became Kawhi Leonard's second option, and that only amplified during the postseason. But he's had a couple of rough spots these past 2 years, and I don't think he's exactly progressed the way everyone thought he would, but especially seeing how good he's gotten since he came into the league, he's now still definitely a near star for the Toronto Raptors. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'm out.